If you clicked on this video, you're probably wanting me to answer the question, should I read The Poppy War? Yes. The answer is yes. That's the video. Bye. In all seriousness, yes, I think you should read The Poppy War, but I'm gonna actually tell you why I think you should read The Poppy War. I'm gonna give you a little description, a rundown, kind of a mini review of all 3 books, and then you can make up your mind on your own. If you want to read it, if this sounds like something that is up your alley, then pick it up. I hope it is, because I love this book. And if not, then you have been warned what this book is about and all of the non-spoilery goodness about the Poppy War. So the Poppy War series is an Asian-inspired military fantasy. It is set and inspired by the Second Sino-Japanese War, which really happened. It's a real thing. There wasn't magic, but it really happened. And it is heavily inspired by that, as well as like different events from that war, which are very, very gruesome and brutal. So this is your warning that this is an adult fantasy, a adult grimdark fantasy. It is violent, it is bloody. There is every possible trigger warning that you can imagine. There is sexual assault, there is torture, there is death, there is drug abuse. The list continues, okay? There's a lot. If you're not sure if you can handle it, what I want you to do is I want you to go research the Second Sino-Japanese War, and I want you to look up specifically the rape of Nanjing. If you still think you want to read this book that is inspired by those events, then you're my people. In all 3 books, we follow our protagonist, Rin, who is a dark-skinned war orphan who is not living the best life. She's got it pretty rough. Her foster family doesn't want her. They were basically forced to take in war orphans after the Second Poppy War, so that is how she ended up with this family. And they basically want to marry her off to this old man and get rid of her at like 14 years old. And she says no, no. So she studies and studies and works really hard, and she passed this test to where she can get into this very prestigious university called Sinogard that is a military university that she doesn't have to pay for because she tested into it. But once she gets there, obviously she is still a dark-skinned war orphan from the bad part of the country, and she's very looked down upon because most of the people there are like your elite and your ruling class. So she kind of struggles with that a lot. And the first half of the first book is this school setting. So I can understand why a lot of people will say that this book feels very YA, but only in that first half of that first book, because it is school setting and it's kind of what we've come accustomed to as YA, like school and training and magic, and it does all of those things. We get a stark change right kind of a third of the way in, and we see actual war. We are no longer in school training for war, we are in war. And the first book takes place over quite a few years. This is the only book that spans multiple years. Books 2 and 3 are very conduced and very like sized down. Book 1, we kind of follow Rin from childhood into like early adulthood. So in the second part of this book, we definitely leave the school setting behind and we jump right into war. And that is where it starts to get very, very dark, very, very quick. We get to experience war through the eyes of our protagonist, and it's not pretty, y'all. I love how this book, especially the first one, really shows you how grim and dark and dirty war is, and how quickly it comes on, and how violent and messy it is, and how it really traumatizes everybody. This book really does a good job with exploring trauma of war and just how it affects people, and especially our main character and the kind of main side characters that we get to see in this book. And one thing I can say is for the entire series, we don't have a likable protagonist. I've seen some people really hate that about this book, and honestly, it doesn't bother me. Rin is not likable. She is not your, like, wanna hug her, girl empowered, you know, kind of protagonist. She's damaged and broken, and she lashes out, and she makes stupid decisions, and she's mean to people that care about her, and she doesn't listen, and all of these things, and she's unreliable, but it just gives it this really real gritty feeling, and I like exploring the world with Rin because she makes these stupid decisions, but she still has motivation. Like, she means well, but she doesn't always do the right thing. Like, she has, like, a goal in mind, and she wants to do nothing other than accomplish that goal, and kind of by any means necessary, whether they're good or not. The first book really kind of is an introduction to the world, and it kind of sets up all of our characters, their personalities, it sets up the magic system, and it kind of starts forming all of our base relationships that are going to be very important throughout the series. Now, when we move into book 2, a lot of our relationships are already established, but we are kind of building upon them. We get to learn even more about this world on a more global scale. We get to see more about, like, the world at large as opposed to just our country that we're in. We get to learn a little bit more about different people, different religions, and about this war at large. And we get, of course, we get more war. This is a war series. So we get a lot more war and a lot more magic. And I love the second book for its exploration of friendship and relationships, because our main friendship in this book goes through so much shit, especially in this book. We go from they're not speaking to, like, something that happens at the end that you're like, oh my god. So we go through it with these characters, and we get to see some characters redeemed and some characters change, and we get to learn new things about the magic and different people within this world. And I really love the second book. I liked it even more than the first book, and it might have been even darker than the first book. Like, it's pretty violent, and there's some really big battle scenes in this book, but there's also a lot of, like, strategizing and smaller scale victories and fights within this. And I don't know, this one might be my favorite in the entire trilogy because I just loved the Dragon Republic. It was so well done. And I just think that this is a really good follow-up to the first book. It answers some questions, but it also asks some new ones. And now the third book, The Burning God, the conclusion to the entire trilogy. Y'all, R.F. Kuang stuck the landing with this one. The end was perfect. It was everything we needed in this book to happen, happened. Now, I'm not saying it ended happily, that we're all thrilled about the ending. I'm gonna be sending Miss Rebecca Kuang my therapy bill from this series, if that can tell you anything. But the ending was perfect. It ended the way it needed to. We really got to explore the level of love and friendship that we get to see in our kind of like main duo. We really get like a finality. We get some questions answered and some plot points really wrap up really well. There are some things in the third book that I didn't like the way they went, and I would have probably preferred them to either be left out altogether or just done a little differently. But I understand why they're there, and it didn't like deter me. It didn't ruin my reading experience. It was just like I would have probably changed that. But I think every book kind of has that, so it didn't bother me too bad. But the ending was just poetic and beautiful, and it's just everything that I needed and didn't want to happen and didn't need. And y'all, this series is so worth the read. I highly recommend, now that all 3 books are out, picking up all 3 and reading them in quick succession, because I kind of feel like reading them quickly is the best way to go about it, because there is kind of like some cliffhangery endings, especially after Dragon Republic. So if you can have Burning God on hand right after you read the Dragon Republic, like that's what you need, because you're gonna want to jump right in to finish the story once you see what happened. I just think this is really good. The last one I think delves more into the realm of political fantasy, because we get a lot of like ramifications, like what happens once you win the war? Like, then you have to run a country, and that's not always a good thing. Like, it's not always the soldier that wins the war cannot also be the person that runs the country. Like, those sometimes need to be different people. And we kind of get to explore that and explore what happens when you win or when you lose. Like, that kind of political aspect to it really, like, I think stepped it up a notch in this last book. A couple things that I really loved about this series as a whole that I think might have a broader appeal. They, for one, do not have a focus on romance. They could have very, very easily slipped into that. Especially after book 2, they could have easily slipped into a like romance relationship, and I am so glad that she left it as just a very, very loving friendship, because I don't think that a romance would have worked. There are slight hints at romantic feelings between some characters, but it is never anything that is really expanded upon. Like, there's no romance in war, y'all. There's not. There was not room for it in this book, and I'm really, really glad that R.F. Kuang left it the way it was and did not try to like shoehorn in this romance that I could have easily seen been a thing. And I'm just really, really glad that that didn't come to fruition. So if you really want a series that is dark, that is very like military fantasy with gods and powers that actually have a cost to them, and really some beautiful friendships, some exploration of grief and trauma, I highly recommend you pick up this series. It's fantastic. There's a reason that it's one of my favorites. There's a reason everyone is ranting and raving about this book. Like, it's worth picking up, I think. And especially finding out now that it has been signed to a movie deal. Now's the time, y'all. Pick it up. All right, well, thank you for hanging out with me. My name is Jessie, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.